Good afternoon. If I could have everybody's attention, please. Thank you. It's 2 o'clock. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all here within the room and online or listening in to this meeting of the Highways and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's taking place in the Spark and Hope Committee Room at County Hall, Glenfield. I'm the Deputy Chairman, Keith Murray, and I'm chairing this meeting today as Tony Gillard is unable to attend. Councillor Craig Smith is substituting for Tony Gillard. Please note some officers will be joining the meeting today online via Microsoft Teams. This meeting is being webcast live to the public on YouTube. Please turn your microphones on when you are speaking and turn off when you have finished. In addition to the committee members, we also have in attendance the Cabinet Lead Member for Highways and Transport, Mr. Ozzy O'Shea, and Cabinet Support Member, Mrs. Maggie Wright. Item 1. Minutes of the meeting held on 20th of January 2022. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of January 2022 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Unanimous. Thank you. Item 2, question time. We've received no questions from the public. Item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Orders 7.3 and 7.5. We have received no questions from members. Item 4, to advise of any other items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. There are no urgent items. Item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any interest to declare? If so, could they state whether they're pecuniary or non-pecuniary? Nothing to declare. Thank you. Item 6, declarations of the party whip in accordance with Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. Are there any declarations of the party whip? No. Item 7, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. I have not received any petitions. Item 8. The first main item on the agenda is the 2022-23 Highways and Transportation Capital Programme and Works Programme. And Jana is online, hopefully. Yes, I can see you there, and will present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Highways and Transport Capital Programme and Works Programme. This is a report we bring to you annually that sets out our major capital works, also our asset management programme, and then our key priorities for the year coming. So for 2022-2023, frightening that we're nearly there already. So the purpose of the report is really to highlight to you those items and also the approach that's being taken in terms of prioritising that work over the coming financial year, and how and you'll see in the policy framework section and deliver previous decisions how we try and align that both to national policy frameworks and also our priorities here at the County Council in Leicestershire as well. So you'll see as we go through the report there that we've set out as well some of the challenges that we expect to see affecting us in 2022-2023, particularly around some of the funding, particularly in relation to our asset management or maintenance programmes, and also the impact of growth and local plans on our work in highways and transport, in particular in terms of use of the network, demand for the network, and keeping it going in line of supporting local plans, working with our district partners. So we've also set out there some ways in the work programme, ways in which we hope to manage some of those risks, and some of the key things we've set out there are around development of a risk management strategy for our asset management programme, and working on local plan evidence bases and working with partners to support maximising our income. So whether that's through bids and DFT funding, through developer contributions, and then also some more imaginative ways of doing that, or unusual ways, such as kind of looking at I've just totally forgotten the name of the fund I was talking about then, in terms of business rates. That's it, in terms of development. Apologies everybody for that. So we'll look to maximise all of those funding streams in order to meet some of the challenges that we've got, and you'll see in the report there's quite a detailed financial context set out for you. But the H&T, so the Highways and Transport side of the capital programme, is around 221 million over the life of the MTFS, with 56 million of that being in the 22-23 financial year. And we've also set out there some of the key schemes that form part of that capital programme, and you'll be familiar with many of them in terms of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, both the north and south sections, Zoch Bridge. We do a lot of work on advanced design, what we've termed the advanced design. That's where we look at the impact of growth and other external factors on the network and try and plan how we can mitigate those in the future. We've got the A511 major road network scheme on there, and we've obviously clearly got a big maintenance programme and also safety schemes in there as well. And the full list's available in the report. So again, as you go through there, you'll see that there's the vast sort of lot of work there on the capital programme, but also on our general work programme, and we try and focus our priorities on that. You'll be aware, I think, probably from discussions in the media and wider, as well as here at Leicestershire, that resources are a challenge for us as well in terms of some of the construction industry, the planning industry. Skilled people are in high demand. So in terms of managing both our financial resources and our own resources, we do try and align those priorities with the corporate objectives, try and make the most impact where we can, and also to kind of take account of those financial pressures, and also to reduce risk for the county council where we can, either by sharing that risk, putting in ways and that we can reduce it by mitigating actions in the future. And sometimes that's about spending money up front to avoid cost down the line as well. So as you go through the report, you'll see those, and there's also the appendices that I draw your attention to, Chair, in terms of both the capital programme is in there as Appendix A and our detailed work programme as Appendix B. And there is also some quite useful links in terms of seeing the sort of this programme over time in the back of the report as well. So I think I would probably leave it there for now, unless there was any particular questions.
Thank you very much. I shall now open it to the floor. Has anybody got any questions they would like to address to the report? Councillor Hunt.
Okay. It's a public meeting, so I'd just like to refer to the part of the report that assesses the lack of resources we've got for maintenance and the ongoing network. And on paragraph 37, it says the authorities' funding alone, as well as government funding allocations, will not be sufficient to provide all the highways and transport infrastructure and measures that will be needed to meet the requirements of the county's growing population. And it's a very serious concern that's been articulated there. It goes on to say, nor is it sufficient to maintain the current standards. It's existing highways assets, and yet we're being promised is too strong a word, but we've got here a considerable list of highways projects, major highways projects. With that backdrop, it's hard to consider that we're going to achieve it. And I wondered if officers could say something about the risks that are contained in this report as regards completion of the capital programme of highways works.
Of course,
Thank you. I'll pass over to the officers. Jana, can you reply to that, or is Anne going to take that?
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hunt. Sorry, I can hear myself a little bit. Apologies if it's distracting. No, I think that's a really valid point. So I think, first of all, perhaps it wouldn't be obvious to people who aren't involved in local government day to day that some of the capital programme we refer to there is funded with specific one-off money, and we call it capital funding. It's there to deliver something tangible on the ground, and that a lot of that funding wouldn't be available to spend on other things anyway. So if people are kind of wondering why we prioritise in that way and why it's spent there on those major schemes, the vast majority of that is there for a specific purpose. You're absolutely right in relation to the ongoing, what we would term revenue funding of the authority, and you know, again, we've referred to the MTFS, so the medium term financial strategy report, acknowledging that there are funding gaps in our funding going forward over this period. That therefore we are looking to manage our programme in line with the budget we've been allocated, which is to, you know, balance all of the needs of the county council. So I think in respect of the growth options that you mentioned there, and that our resources and the government allocations won't do that, that's probably been true for some time. So you'll note that we've applied for funding and bid for funding before. So things like the DFT, the Department for Transport Majors funding, we've bid into that to support growth in Melton. We've bid into the local growth fund to support growth in Charnwood. And again, we've also looked to maximise developer contributions in those things by having an evidence base and requiring contributions or delivery of schemes where growth is coming forward. And in relation to those items, that's how we would seek to manage the risks associated with growth and infrastructure on that point. In relation to the asset management funding, it's a little bit more complicated in the short term. We do have you know, we do have quite a high standard of road quality in Leicestershire, and we've maintained that for some time. And some of the criteria that we use to look at maintenance into managing our assets, we may need to review those in the future, and that's where this report is kind of highlighting that. The longer term is to look at options for preventative maintenance and prioritise preventative maintenance, so that you know, it's like looking after your house, isn't it? You do an expensive job to avoid doing a sort of half expensive job every year for 20 years, and it works like that. And again, we'll be exploring opportunities towards that. But I think for people looking at our funding, I think the gap between what perhaps needs doing in terms of maintenance on the network to maintain the standard it is now and the funding we have available, there is a gap emerging there, and we wanted to be upfront about that. But that's not to say that we're not maintaining the roads. There is, like you say, a significant capital programme and works programme in relation to asset management, and we will continue to maintain the road standard, but to a safety standard, but doing that based on information about how the road is used, what risk is associated with those assets, so that we can put the money where it's most needed. And I hope that answers the question, Chair.
I think it was a very comprehensive answer, but it's up to Councillor Hunt to determine whether it's satisfied his question.
You've given me another chance to jump in on this very quickly. That was a very full answer indeed. I read in the next paper we've got that we can expect only 15% of the cost from developers. Is that something I can raise on the next item, or is it?
I'll just bring the director in. Over to you, Anne.
That would be, I could cover it very briefly now, if that's okay, Chair, through you. Is fundamentally that's the rules and requirements around a very specific funding stream, that major road network funding stream. It's a requirement. If you're bidding into that, you have to have a minimum of 15% match funding. That could come from developers, it could come from your own resources, but you know, non-government funding. So that's specific to that funding stream. But if I may, Chair, just to add to what Jana has said, just to put it in a wider context, well, Jana's gone into both the capital and the revenue side, so how we maintain our roads and the challenges we have on that. And she's absolutely right. We, compared to many other authorities, we have a reasonable standard of road or a good condition of road. However, the challenge is increasing. This is, you know, a national problem. We're all seeing increased traffic on our roads, increased HGVs. They do, you know, disproportionately more damage to our roads, etc. We have extensive road networks to maintain. And at the same time, however, over a number of years, government funding, particularly on the revenue side, has remained relatively static. So in trying to meet those challenges and taking account of things like inflation, we're able to deliver less for, you know, that same amount of money given the extent of the challenge we have. So it's just to put it into that wider context. This is the same nationally, and I'm sure you will see every year there's a national survey that comes out about the extent and the value of the backlog that all the local highway authorities assess across their network, and what government would have to fund for us to address that. So really, just to put it in that national context, in addition to, you know, Jana's explanation about how we're managing locally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fillmore.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's much more easy. So, you know, I think I'm sure we all recognise the points Mr. Hunt raises. I personally am confident that our officers will maximise the opportunities and the resources that we have. But what I actually wanted to say was I'm sensing that, Jana, you wrote most of this report, if not all of it, and congratulations. It's a really easy and informative report to read. Thank you very much.
Oh, I should just jump in there, Chair, and say a lot of work from the team went into there, so I won't take credit for it. But I hope it does offer, you know, a good, easy opportunity for people to see what we're up to.
I like an honest person sharing the praise. Thank you. I'd like to retrospectively declare a non-pecuniary interest in this item on the agenda as the Cabinet member for North West Leicestershire for planning, because I'm going to ask a question that's within the report and it's linked to the A511 corridor, and you've mentioned on page 40 that planning is to be submitted in 2022. When in 2022? Thank you.
I could jump in there, Chair, if that helps. We are taking a report to Cabinet at the end of this month, and it's seeking approval to submit for that planning application, which, you know, subject to that approval would be in April, is when we're intending.
Thank you. Sorry, any other points on item 8? Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful to Max for spotting paragraph 37, because I think this is rather startling in its implications. The key sentence there is not only is that the key reference there is not only that the authorities' funding alone, as well as government funding, will be insufficient, then goes on to talk about the growth proposals imposed upon this authority, and without investment from elsewhere, Leicestershire's transport system will deteriorate. That's a carefully crafted paragraph, and I'd like to give credit to whoever it was who put it together, because it encapsulates the problem we face with our famous strategic growth plan. I've been worried, and I've made no secret of the fact I've been worried for a long time about the land take, loss of countryside, farmland and all the rest of it, and the inability of, as I see it, the suppliers of services to meet the demands in terms of electricity and sewage, for example. But this is a new aspect. This paragraph indicates that there is an additional problem with ourselves as Highway Authority being able to meet the requirements of this additional growth. I take it we're only being asked to note this report, aren't we? I do wonder whether this should be flagged up to the Cabinet with a suggestion that this should be forwarded to the members advisory group who are responsible for the strategic growth plan, to point out that this is an emerging issue which should be taken into account when we consider whether this county can actually take its share of the 300,000 houses a year, being that the government is that represents the government's ambitions for this for growth. Could I suggest that this paragraph itself is highlighted to the Cabinet as a matter of concern which should be noted?
Thank you. And you're correct. We're not voting on it. We're just noting the report, and the fact that this is going to Cabinet and the paragraph is in there. I'm sure Cabinet will see it. I don't think we have a need to flag it up for any urgency, but I'll take advice from the officers if they want to add an addendum to this report to go to Cabinet.
I mean, I think, Chair, I'm supportive of your view in that it is within the Cabinet report, fully, you know, there for members to see, members of the Cabinet, when they are debating this, when it does go.
Councillor O'Shea, coming now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Cabinet it's going to Cabinet, and Cabinet will debate it and go through the report to Councillor Bill.
Yes, Councillor Hunt.
We've just heard from an officer and a Cabinet member about this, but on every report that goes to Cabinet, there is a section reserved for comments from Scrutiny. And if there are no comments from Scrutiny, it looks as if we're not doing our job, to be honest. And I don't think there's any harm in, whatever the paragraph might be, in saying that the Scrutiny Committee were concerned with or drew attention to paragraph 37, if that's the one we want to do. But just to say, well, Cabinet can deal with it, it's not our job. Our job is to report directly to Cabinet, and they take a report at every item from Scrutiny.
I'm prepared to put a sentence in the report that Cabinet can pay attention to paragraph 37 for item number 8. Thank you. Item 9, the major road network, identification of the next priority corridor. We've received some written representations from Dr. Feltham regarding this agenda, and also Councillor King and a district councillor whose name I haven't got. I do apologise. The director and others will respond to those in writing, which has actually been done, I think, yeah. And she's also going to cover the representation as she presents her report. And over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In 2018, the Department for Transport designated a new hierarchy in a new level in the road hierarchy network, and they created what's called the major road network. This is in recognition that a number of the roads within our local road network actually perform a higher level function and therefore should see an enhanced level of investment in that. The main objectives of the major road network are set out in paragraph 13 of the report before you today, and they include congestion reduction, supporting economic growth and housing delivery, recognising the needs of all road users, not just cars, and complementing and linking into the strategic road network. The MRN in Leicestershire that was designated, because we had to go through a process and a consultation to agree what the MRN was with the DFT, and that's appended as Appendix A to your report, and it's the green routes on that map. And the really important factor of this, as I've alluded to, is there's a separate funding stream available for us to bid into to invest in this network. And that government had allocated £3.5 billion of their £28 billion National Roads Fund during the 2020 to 25 period for that major roads network. The types of investment they had envisaged were schemes, bids for between 20 and 50 million, and that's where the 15% that Mr. Hunt referred to earlier. Any bid we put in has to have a minimum of 15% match contribution. The deciding bids going forward was put to the subnational transport bodies, so for our area, Midlands Connect, and they had the role of prioritising for the whole of the Midlands the schemes that would go forward to government. In the first round, to cut a long story and a lot of work short, we put forward the A511 corridor, and we're currently progressing with that scheme. That was the best fit under the criteria. This report, therefore, therefore is focusing on the potential schemes for the next or a future next round. Government hasn't announced it yet, but assuming there's a future round of bidding for MRN funding and therefore the next priorities. We've therefore undertaken an assessment exercise looking at the criteria that were set by Midlands Connect and assessed our routes within the county for which one would be the most robust and have most chance therefore of securing any funding. That assessment work has concluded that the A6 North A6004 corridor, which runs basically from the Leicester boundary at the A46 north through Loughborough up to Kegworth, would best fits those criteria and would have the most chance of success. Reasons for that in short are the level of growth along the corridor. We've got substantial growth at the southern end with the Broadnook development at Bristol and in Loughborough itself, as well as future growth emerging through Charnwood's local plan, which is in development. It connects major economic developments, including Science Park at Loughborough, the university, the proposed new HS2 station at East Midlands Parkway, and you'll be aware of proposals around Development Corporation in Freeport. There's also the continued expansion of East Midlands Gateway at the northern end. There's other aspects to the corridor. It's a significant commercial bus corridor. There are flooding issues at the southern end, and a bid would give us potential opportunity to address some of these issues as well. I would stress, however, the conclusion that this corridor is the best fit against the criteria for a bidding round for the county doesn't actually mean that the rest of the MRN or indeed other roads in the county don't have challenges. It purely reflects that this is the best fit with the criteria set by Midlands Connect. Subject to Cabinet agreeing, because this is going to Cabinet, this corridor as our next potential scheme, our next steps would be to carry out early feasibility work to really understand, does it have a good chance, is there a robust case? I would stress, however, again, it doesn't commit us to bidding. We don't have to go forward, or indeed if we do bid, there's no guarantee that we would actually secure the funding. This is purely about identifying which is our focus for the next bidding round. As the chair's already alluded to, we did receive representations from County Councillors Dr Feltham and Mr King, and from a District Councillor Mr Wellband, and they made the case that the priority should instead be the A6 South. That corridor was assessed along with the others, and in brief, it scores much lower than the current one we've put forward. The details of the assessments are in the appendix to the report, and if you've had a chance to see, there's just recently been circulated a written response to those representations. So I'll conclude there, but happy to receive any comments or questions, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a little comment to say, a little chat. I've obviously read this report in great depth, and we would all like every one of the corridors to be addressed as quickly as possible, but the money just isn't available really. So we've stuck to the criteria that have been set to us, and the data that's been used in my eyes is objective, not subjective. And if you look at the league table on page 91, there's only 4 points separate the top 10 places on the league table. So it's very close. It really is very close. And it's like Anna said, just because the A6 North 6004 is going to be put forward doesn't mean to say the other routes have not got issues. We need to be quite clear on that. There's issues everywhere across the county, but we just can't deal with them all at once. So I'll open it to the floor now if anybody's got any comments. Councillor Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Like yourself, perhaps I should have declared an interest because I'm twin-hatted. In other words, I'm lead member on planning at Hinkley and Bosworth, as well as being on this august body. I've got no argument whatsoever with the work of this report and its conclusion, but if I may, can I just refer to the A47, because I think this is the last chance I'll have to actually express it anywhere in this building. because before we hit our local plan cut-off period. What concerns me is that, well, the A47 is a key road across the western side of the county, and it is a county council responsibility. And as far as I'm aware, there is still a disagreement between county and borough as to the state of that road, because it is being used to the local plan. Now, I find this an acute embarrassment because, as I say, I've got responsibilities here, and I have responsibilities at Hinckley, and I've offered on more than one occasion to act as a go-between to try to resolve this difference, which I understand has still not been. I think the talks are taking place, but there's still no resolution unless the situation has changed since I've been last informed.
Councillor Bill, can I just stop you there? We're talking about item 9 on the agenda, which has got nothing to do. It may have an indirect link to your local plan, but this is about the arterial and routes that have been selected and the criteria we've used to select it. So if you've got issues with the county highways linked to your local plan and all the rest of it, I suggest that you take that offline and speak to the officers, because this is not the right forum for that discussion.
Yes, I do accept that, Chairman, and I will bow to your ruling, but there are very, very few occasions when I get the opportunity to, in this building, to express my concerns about the A47, and therefore, with your leave, I've expressed my concerns, and all I'm saying is I very much would like to see a resolution of the dispute, which has been rumbling on for far too long.
I think the point's been taken, and I used yeah, I understand your frustrations. My wife drives down the 447 every day to go to work and back. I use it quite regularly. When I discussed this report with my wife last night, she was quite shocked it was down the bottom, but it's the way it is, really. We can only deal with one to go forward to government. Thank you for your point. Thank you. Any other points from the floor for item 9?
Yes, please, Chair. Again, as you have done, I'd refer to 91 and the league table, as you termed it. First of all, I'd like to express a view from Councillor Mrs. Betty Newton, who represents Hathern. I'm not here to represent Hathern, but they will be very concerned with the proposal that's been put forward for the A6004, which is the leading contender in the league table. Unlike many people, perhaps, all I can see here is more traffic going through the centre of Loughborough, and through villages on the way, notably Hathern, obviously. Furthermore, I don't think this report adequately looks at alternative routes. And if as has been quoted, we're talking about the routes to the airport, the Freeport, and all that large development at junction 24 of the motorway, it's no coincidence that the motorway is the best route to take, whether it's via the A50 or other routes. And I can't see the benefit of putting more traffic on the A6004, because that's what it'll mean. If the cost is perhaps dualling the A6 through Loughborough, cutting it in half, and imposing extra traffic on the other. So in that instance, and I know the A6 south of Leicester as well, I think that the councillors in Kibworth have got a point. And perhaps this isn't the best form of league table. If it's the only one we can work with, if this is what the DFT says have got to be the measurements and not, for example, the accessibility to alternative routes, then we've got to live with it. But I personally don't welcome it.
Your point is taken, Councillor Hunt, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more people in that council you've mentioned who have got concerns about any road improvements, because it will affect a lot more people than just that councillor. But I'll emphasise again, the data is the data. The league table is being produced from the data that we have to stick to, and therefore this number one of the league table has to be put forward, so we have to work with that. Anne?
Just add to that, thank you, Chair. Just in terms of, and noted Mrs Newton's, you know, you passing on Mrs Newton's views, etc. And I'll certainly pass that back to the officers. But in terms of the accessibility to alternative routes, what I would say this next phase of work is about, you know, that initial feasibility. So we will be looking in detail in each section of this route, you know, subject to obviously cabinet approval. But in doing that, then transport modelling will take place, and that does take into account the much wider road network. So it does look at other routes there, so it doesn't confine it to this. However, some of your other points, you know, still remain. But, you know, just to reassure you, in terms of the transport modelling to support it, it does look in a much wider sense. So it would take into account routing down the M1, other routes, etc., etc.
Thank you. Any more points on item 9? Moving on to item 10.
Sorry, I just thought it was worth pointing out that in Dr. Felton's representations, the very last line, he makes a specific request of the committee. So I just wanted to be absolutely sure what the committee's sort of response to that is, and what it is you're going to be recommending to Cabinet. Yeah, it just says, in conclusion, I'd like the committee to ask for the A6s to be reassessed using updated AADF measurements and considering air pollution.
Did you answer that in the written reply?
If not, Chair, if we haven't sufficiently, we'll definitely go back and clarify that. I think, however, Mr. Phillimore might have wanted to say something as well.
I was only going to ask if it was even feasibly possible within the mechanism and the timescale and the bidding round and in the, you know, the DFT guidance that you have, and is it even possible to revisit it?
There is no time deadline in speaking of that, but, you know, just echoing the Chair's earlier point, the evidence there, you know, and air quality was one of the things that was actually one of the key criteria. So if we look at the evidence again, it will still come out with the same answer, I think would be my thought on that.
Thank you.
If I may just pick up on Ewan's point then, so is the recommendation and the response from the Scrutiny Committee that in discussion with the director, there is no value in that reassessment being taken place because the results will be the same? Is that broadly it? Yeah.
I agree. So if that could be recorded and fed back to Dr. Felton. Thank you. Well, we're not taking a vote, so I think it's a recorded and it's the public can play it back. Your point's taken, but as has been explained, if we reassess the route again, the criteria will be the same again and the score will be the same again. So I can't see the benefit to anybody in going over old ground to try and improve the score.
But I think we can report to the Cabinet that Mr. Hunt has
absolutely,
a different view.
Yeah. Points noted. Thank you. Yes.
A reply to to the point I made earlier, either offline or outside this meeting, if not this afternoon.
I shall pass that to Anne. Could you possibly speak?
Perhaps if Mr. Bill could put his query in writing, we could come back to him. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 10, Highways Initiative. Delivering for parishes and communities. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. This report provides the committee with an update on 550,000 that had been allocated during financial year 2019-20 to initiative delivering for parishes and communities. We also report on similar initiatives that have emerged following that and additional highway funding that has been allocated to the department over and above our core highways maintenance budgets. Of the 550 for the Parish and Communities Fund, you'll see in the report 180,000 was spent on activities that are, often considered as low risk, but we tend to struggle as a department funding out of our core budgets. This covers things such as edging back of footways, tree, vegetation work, etc. Things that actually, local communities often ask us for, but unfortunately our core budgets don't always stretch to, cover the quantum that's being required. 300,000 of the funding was put towards data collection on the condition of our signing and lining across the county. That has proved extremely useful because what we then do is we've used that data to make sure that our work programmes are prioritising and addressing the areas that need it most, over the, since that time, and we can still use it for coming years. 70,000 was allocated to staff resource to allow time for better communicating with communities, attending parish meetings, that kind of thing, and supporting members directly. And another element of the work that came out of that funding was the development of our A to Z Highways website, which we hope you're finding a useful resource. Following that initial allocation, we did get, the department did get in an additional 7.3 million of the County Council's own resources for further highway works. Half of that, or just under half of that, 3.5 million went into our core budgets for highway maintenance, such as patching, surfacing work, etc. And 3.7 million went into one-off work that we wouldn't normally carry out with those core budgets. Paragraph 7, the table there shows the breakdown of how we spent that 3.7 million. The one I would pull out was the 1 million that went to the Parishes and Communities Fund. You might recall that early on in the pandemic, government put out some funding for towns to put in measures in their public realm space to help with social distancing. That funding, however, didn't apply to our smaller communities. It was actually for towns, so larger size settlements. So what the County Council did was allocate that million to those smaller communities to bid into for measures that they would want to see in their local areas. And it went to things like widening footways, providing markings, providing signing to help with social distancing, as well as active travel in those areas. The second table under paragraph 7 shows the spend to date and where monies have not been fully spent at this point in time. And the only one I'd highlight there is the Community Speed Management Initiative, which carries forward 635,000. Basically, the traffic patterns we had during the pandemic, and you're well aware that they weren't what we call normal traffic patterns, meant we couldn't carry out our speed survey work, and therefore, we couldn't assess the areas that we would want to apply speed management initiatives into. We're now currently working through the backlog of those speed surveys, but that's the reason for that carry forward. Later on the report, you'll see that we have some information around the geographic spread of that spend. So we do sometimes get asked how that's applied across the county, and equally, given that some of this funding has gone to as we call it, parishes and communities, some therefore non-parished areas. We recognise that areas that don't have a body to speak for them, it can be harder for us to gauge views about what type of measures they might want. And some of the funds were that type of funding where we wanted to engage with those areas to find out their views. So in recognition of that, we thought it might be useful to include some information there about that spend across those different areas. So just for the wider context, firstly, 83% of the highway network, so if you just go by length of highway, falls within areas that are parished, and the remaining 17% in non-parished areas. There are a number of ways or metrics you could use, such as population, physical area, etc. But we've looked at the highway network. The tables on page 116 and 117 show the breakdown across the types of work and the funding source there. A couple that are of interest. In terms of the Parish and Communities Fund, 29% was in non-parished areas and 71% in parished areas. But across our core maintenance spend and those additional funding elements that went into maintenance activities, and equates to 41,000 jobs, so individual, pieces of work, 27% were in non-parished areas and 73 in parished areas. I appreciate there's a lot of information in the report. I hope you found it a bit of a useful update because, we have over the last few years been, lucky enough to have additional funding coming into the department. So hopefully it's useful summary about how we have applied that funding and what we've delivered with it. I'll stop there, Chair, and hand back.
Thank you. And before I bring Councillor Smith in, I'd just like to say that was the easiest report to read in the whole pack. Thank you. And the residents of Ellistown and Battleflat Parish Council would like to say a big thank you because they got a grant and they cut back a lot of the footpaths and some of the edges of the footpath. It was the first time they'd seen light in many years. So, yeah, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. It is a very thorough report, so thank you very much for that. I represent within my division one of the largest non-parished areas in northwest Leicestershire. I appreciate the money that you've spent, obviously trying to engage with and take that forward. Is that something that we're going to continue to do so? Because obviously having these large areas of unparished, we need to really interact with these people. Perhaps we can do that through the subcommittees on the district councils and things like that. Could you just clarify exactly how you intend to obviously help these non-parished areas, please?
It is something we've been applying a bit of thought to, and it does depend on the future and how that goes and how much we have different funding streams whereby it's beneficial and we need a different mechanism. It is kind of limited at the moment. We've got the Members Highway Fund that you'll be well aware of, and again that we're working hard with those members in non-parished areas to try and get that engagement and make sure that we are assisting and they're not losing out in any way, so that they can access the opportunities and the member can hear what it is their area would benefit from and would like to see delivered in their area. Beyond that, our core funding, as I say, doesn't get allocated in any way in recognition to local government structure of whether there's a parish or there's not. It's purely based on the evidence and the need of that area, i.e., in its most basic form, if the road condition is such it needs resurfaced, it will get resurfaced, assuming we've got the funding for it and it's the top of the priority list, it will get resurfaced regardless of any, parish or non-parish. So I would say at the moment, there is limited new funding coming along that requires a different approach. However, a recent experience with things like the Parish and Communities Fund and the Members Highway Fund will continue to work to try and support members and support those areas without. We don't have specific initiatives for it, more than the ongoing engagement we've got with yourselves through the small team and the resource that some of this funding has allowed us to take on board to really extend that communication. Nothing, sorry, a really short answer. There isn't anything direct that we're doing at the moment. The new initiatives coming along, we're building on the new work that we've had over the last few years and taking the learning from that to see how we can really improve and help with those areas that don't have a formal group to represent them.
Thank you. Any other points from the floor for item 10? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I'm afraid I've got a bit of history with this, so you'll have to bear with me. I was around when this report went through Cabinet, and it was predominantly seen as something for parish councils. I don't think communities were mentioned as it went through. So I would like to say something about communities first of all. This has been a bit of a fig leaf really to hide the fact that really much of the work in the past has been directly for parish councils and not for areas which were unparished. Partly, as the director says, because they don't have direct representation in that way, although they do have district councillors and county councillors. But when the authority talks about communities, they don't really know any communities. If you look at the surveys that have been done, the consultations, the engagement, there are never any lists of communities in unparished areas. What they probably mean is organisations like the voluntary sector and so on, which cover the whole county or the whole district. So that's always, for me, been a bit of a sore point, that we are dismissed as a representative of a non-parish area, as communities, and not really with much reference. And I'll just give you one example of that. With the bus consultation, very recently, everybody was asked about that. Of course, it was done on the web, and it was done on Leicestershire Matters and so on, the general ways, but there was nothing specific to non-parished areas. But non-parished areas are the areas with the lowest car usage, the people who don't have access to the private car, who take buses, and yet they were left off because they're in non-parished areas. And just on the second part of the report, because this is not the best forum really to go into depth on this, but one of the problems whereby communities or non-parish areas can't compete with parished areas is that parished areas have a precept. And my first meeting of this committee 4 years ago, we were told that parishes were welcome to propose projects, and they could top up something that the county couldn't otherwise afford. But there's nothing like that for so-called communities in non-parish areas, because they don't have a precept. But, it's worse than that. That if you look at parish areas, they're predominantly well equipped with advocates on the parish council, the chair of the parish council, the clerk of the parish council, and so on. But particularly in the more deprived areas of the county, they have nothing. They don't have parish or community meeting places, and they don't have people who sort of come out of a career of being a slick lawyer or a crafty accountant or whatever. They're just ordinary people who want to do a bit of good for their community, but they're out-competed by the parish councils in that way. And the final little example I'd just like to quote is one where we wanted a couple of simple bus shelters. Now, if you want a bus shelter in a parish council, you go to the parish council. But after being rebuffed 2 or 3 times by the county, I went to the district. The district said it was the county. I came back to the county and I said I couldn't have one. The reason I couldn't have one was because there weren't enough people taking them. Well, most of, I was proposing quite popular bus stops actually. And even when they agreed that it was something that the county could deal with, I was told I couldn't deal with them because they didn't recognise the fact that I had residents with mobility difficulties. So it's incredibly hard to get something which is quite simple for a parish council. And on that final point, I haven't been able to afford a VAS sign for my area, and I don't think actually a VAS sign would be that appropriate. But what I have done is done what a parish council could have done years and years ago, which was put up a few bards and some benches. And that would be terrific for the local communities. And in that respect, the member highways fund is actually making progress on this question. I quite recognise that we're now all getting the same amount of allocation, and that's a good thing, and we're moving it forward. And I recognise that non-parish areas are getting more recognition than they used to. I'm sorry I've gone on a bit, but I know the director will understand why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt, and I obviously give you some leeway because I know you're passionate about this issue, and I knew you'd managed to squeeze bush shelters in at some stage in the meeting. But you obviously made a lot of comments in there, and crafty lawyers slick lawyers and crafty accountants. I hope you don't assume they're all like that, because my wife's an accountant and I can assure you she's anything but crafty when it comes to the accounts. Okay, but your point is taken and we know you're passionate, and I don't think there's any questions in that, so we'll just move on. Thank you. Item 10. Okay, we'll move on to item 11, road casualty reduction in Leicestershire. And Jana, you're presenting this report, I understand. And we've also got joining us online, Graham Compton from Leicestershire Police. So welcome, Graham, if he's online. I can't see the screen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm online.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So over to you, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think if it's okay with everybody, I'll start off and introduce the main report, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Graham, who'll give you a short rundown on the appendix from the police. So if that's okay, we'll crack on. So you'll see the report entitled Road Casualty Reduction in Leicestershire. We have got a purpose of the report there to set out to give you kind of a headline statistics on the road casualty rate for 2020. So I should just point out that we do get confirmation due to the investigations and statistical analysis even that happens. We're kind of a year in arrears, so we're looking at the year 2020 here. Clearly look at sort of some issues surrounding that, including COVID-19 and the impact on vulnerable road users, and then also as Graham will pick up, Leicestershire Police's approach to road safety. In Leicestershire, and indeed Leicester City and Rutland as well, there is very much a partnership approach to road safety, as well as with the local highway authorities, and again pleased to be here with Graham really to demonstrate that as well. What I will just say for those for the avid fans of Leicestershire's Highway and Transport Scrutiny, this is a report that we bring every year, but this year just taking on board a bit of feedback from members as well about kind of the length of the report. We have, believe it or not, actually shortened this report a bit, made it more focused. We generally set out our entire approach to road safety and the initiatives that have happened. That detail is still there, but it's in an appendix, and we're going to focus on those key issues that I've just highlighted today. And again, we'll keep that under review in terms of how and we present this. We've obviously had a couple of unusual years in relation to road statistics as well, so we'll keep that under review, and again welcome comments from this committee on that as we go through. So, Chair, if it's okay, I'll just point out that there is quite a lot of background and policy decisions and previous decisions, again, informing this report. Some of those from national pictures, some of that more locally, and probably just highlight probably from 2021 onwards that the biggest change we've had in terms of road safety and our approach, probably the update to the highway code that was laid before Parliament in December 2021 and enacted or implemented from this year in January onwards. But you know, the approach from government since 2015 is just set out there, and a lot of the work that we still do today builds on those initiatives and those sort of policy bases nationally. I think it's really important for us to keep in line with national perspectives. It helps us with funding, helps us with things like enforcement of any activity we want to do. So making sure that we're in line with those policies is really important to make sure we're as effective as we can be, and those are set out in the report. So there's quite a bit on that in there, and as you move then down, we've just highlighted the changes to the format of the report. And I would say though that all that data is still available, and there is some helpful appendices as well in terms of data and details, and again particularly probably useful for the committee and any members of the public that would be interested in. One of the summaries there is kind of using infographics, and I think set out in quite an easy to use format. And again, I just draw your attention to that if you need to have a look at this area in later, outside of the meeting. So as we said there, we've set out that we focused on a few particular areas, and then looking at the first one of those being the impact of COVID-19. Probably won't surprise you to note that in 2020 lockdown had a significant impact on all road activity and highways activity. And here you'll see that the government published a study or report on the impact of lockdown. And there's a number of about 10 observations there it made, but again, just highlighting really that road casualties did decrease in line with road traffic and national lockdowns. There were smaller reductions in fatalities and casualties. So, and again, we did see in Leicestershire, you're still having serious and fatal incidents, unfortunately, happening, even though there is less traffic on the road. And there's some other trends there in terms of the national picture. And what we've done in the report is just compare some of those statistics nationally to Leicestershire, and we've also set out the Leicestershire picture. So in terms of some of the key, there's a few tables in the report, Chair, but in terms of some of the key items there, you can say in general that we saw the fewest number of total casualties in Leicester that we've got on record at Leicestershire, I should say, sorry, at 880 in total. But when you compare that casualty rate to the vehicle kilometres travelled, so we do it in per billion just to make the maths nice and easy, we can see that the casualty rate actually increased slightly. So there's lots of ways to cut these statistics, and we have tried to sort of set them out for you in the report in both visual form and written form. So as just sort of, I think, probably highlight again sort of the differences between Leicestershire statistics and Great Britain statistics overall. We saw an overall increase in the number of killed or seriously injured casualties, and that was a difference to Great Britain as a whole, which saw a reduction. And we saw an increase in the number of car occupants killed or seriously injured, against a decrease nationally as well. And there are some of the noticeable statistics that we've pointed out there in the report for you. I mean, some of that's quite difficult to compare nationally in the sense that into some of the numbers we're into with a couple of hundred incidents, the specifics of those make quite a big difference to the statistics, but we are as a partnership looking into the causes of those, and obviously looking at how we can where they're relevant in a post-pandemic. I don't think we're allowed to say post-pandemic, are we? It's an ongoing situation in terms of COVID, and as sort of we see more traffic back on the road, which measures are still appropriate to support some of those. So just moving on through there, we've got a bit of a section there kind of comparing Leicestershire's performance. I think probably important to note, sort of compare that with county authorities, rural communities with similar road networks to ours. And you'll see there that we perform quite well in relation to other authorities in county district county areas. And then again, the reports are in there for you. So I think then moving on to the headline figures we've outlined there, and again, Chair, I could probably talk to you all day about the figures, so I'll just try and pick out a couple of key ones and of course answer any questions if needed. But I think still sadly for us as a partnership and as a county, we still saw that 18 people were killed in the year 2020 in road traffic collisions, and 191 people were seriously injured. So 209 people falling into that category that obviously we're most trying to avoid. There were 880 reported casualties of all severities in that year, as we mentioned above, and that is the lowest on record. And I think that's, you know, probably to be expected in relation to the COVID and pandemic situation. And we'll talk a little about reporting in a moment or two as well. And again, there's some further sort of key statistics there. And we've drawn some conclusions in the report in terms of the statistics. And like I say, work's ongoing then to understand the detail of those, the area of those, where they happen and whether any other intervention or action is needed. And we do that both as a highway authority and also as part of the partnership as well. So I think then just moving quickly on to the data quality part of the report, and I think this is positive news actually. We highlighted in here that we'd got some concerns in terms of both the numbers of reports coming through in the past, and that's you know, again it's for us all, isn't it, resources and where you make most of the difference. But we did notice that in terms of reporting slight accidents and collisions, there was less coming through, and I think we agreed that a proportion of that was probably in relation to how resources were being used with the police and where they needed to put most of that, but also that in general some of that was about less accidents happening, and we did some investigation into that. And then building on that, in terms of how the reporting system comes through to us and making use of the data, we've been working with our partners, and again recently, I think even since this report, well definitely since this report has been written, made some really good progress on how we pass data between ourselves and make sure that quality of data is there so that we can make the best decisions about investment in safety in Leicestershire's roads. So I'm pleased to sort of update you, Chair, on that part of the report as well. And we continue to work in partnership and look at particularly targeted areas around vulnerable road users as well. Sorry, Chair, I'm conscious there's quite a bit in the report, so I'll just try and summarise around the targets that we've set as well. We came to when it was the Environment and Transport Overview Scrutiny in 2020 to look at the targets. You see the progress set out there and also what we're looking to do going forward. So we're proposing at the moment, and we will keep this under review, looking at other policies that we have, like local transport plan, for instance. We're due to complete another version of that, and this will inform our targets, and we'll keep them under review in there. But we'd like to continue with the 40% reduction in killed or seriously injured casualties, and we've taken an average of the 2016 to 20 period for that as a target to achieve by 2031. And actually, like other authority areas, we would like to set that aspirational target of 0 deaths caused by road traffic collisions by 2050 as well. We've drawn out some key statistics there in terms of vulnerable road users, so pedestrians, cyclists, children, young people on the road, motorcyclists as well. There are quite a lot there, so if it's okay, Chair, propose not to sort of read through those or do them, but they are set out there in the report if people do need them, and again, happy to answer any questions. And we've also sort of recognising that funding around safety schemes it's not uniform, and there are a few ways in which Leicestershire has invested in safety agendas relevant to the road safety and road casualty agenda, and they're set out in the report as well. Looking in the longer term, and I think we would always advise people to consider trends over a period of time. You do get in-year variations with statistics like these. So we're concluding there that since 2000, despite significant increases in motor vehicle traffic, the roads are safer than they were there. We've seen the lowest number of road casualties, although again I think we probably want to look at that after the impact of lockdowns of kind of weave through the system. We've met the 2020 targets for LTP in terms of total and slight casualties, but you'll see that killed and seriously injured casualties wasn't met. And again, that'll be a focus for both Leicestershire and the partnership going forward. And I think, again, it's just a statistical point that sometimes some of the trends locally are difficult to manage because of the numbers that you're dealing with and how, particular incidents can skew the numbers over time. But again, the information we've got is there and in the report. So apologies, Chair, for taking a little while to go through that. And if it's OK, I'll hand over to my colleague Graham for his section.
Thank you for a comprehensive report, and yes, please carry on.
Thank you, Jana. Good afternoon, Chairman, councillors, and thank you for giving me an opportunity from the police just to give everyone a brief overview of what we're doing within the partnership and across the board in the field of road safety, which is very important. A lot of what I've got to say will be a reiteration of what Jana has just said about Leicestershire County Council's figures. But I wanted to carry on with what Jana has said about the Road Safety Partnership, because it's a very, very important aspect of road safety throughout the policing area. And of course, you will know that Jana is now the chair of the board, the Road Safety Partnership Board, and a very good job she's doing too. And some of the topics that the board has tackled in the last 12 months include the speed and red light camera procurement, the attendance and accommodation at the driver education workshops, and the funding of many ongoing road safety projects across the force area, which is very, very important when we're trying to impact on all aspects of casualties. We did re-establish through Jana the management team in 2020, which works to the board, and the management team is doing lots of work on behalf of the board now, including the emergence of anything that happens on the road which is impacting on casualties, including e-scooters, which I'm sure is close to your hearts. And in addition to that, bridge strikes, which I know a number of you are suffering from high vehicles, the Healthier Streets project, which again is now gaining momentum in our towns and cities, and general road safety campaigning throughout the whole of the year. You may not know, but I'll just remind members that membership of the Road Safety Partnership includes representatives from all of the emergency services, the National Health Service, the 3 local authorities, and National Highways, who deal with the trunk road and motorway network, formerly known as Highways England. And one thing you may be interested in, that during the year, the Road Safety Partnership Board approved initiatives totalling some £200,000 to spend on road safety projects throughout the force area. This funding is made available by the Road Safety Unit from payments received by people attending the driver education workshops who have contravened a red light or been caught exceeding the speed limit, which I'm afraid many of us are guilty of, as you probably know. And we put about 20,000 people through the driver education workshops each year, and a proportion of that funding comes back into the Road Safety Partnership projects, which is very, very important. I just wanted to mention briefly one of the sub-working groups that report to the management team, which is the data group. Jana has mentioned it briefly in her response, and the data group looked very carefully at all the RTC data over the preceding year, and they're doing this on an ongoing basis in order to find any emerging trends that's coming out of it. And as Jana has said, our vulnerable road users are of particular concern across the whole of the Force area. And these include young and elderly drivers, our motorcyclists, pedal cyclists, pedestrians and horse riders. And I'll be touching on our ongoing campaign aimed at these groups shortly. The promotion of all our campaigns, and we try to run a campaign through the partnership every single month in line with the national campaigns, and that promotion is undertaken by the Road Safety Partnership Communications Officer, Jonathan Clarkson, who makes full use of the social media. And I mean, you're probably like me, many of you, you're used to the old type of media activity, and I'm not fully conversant with all the latest social media. But this is something that the comms officer now is well attuned to, and it's something that the partnership is looking at very closely. How do we relate to our young people in terms of road safety? It's a difficult topic, but one that we're working very hard on. And as I've briefly mentioned, we do try to keep in touch with the National Police Chief Council's calendar for campaigning for the whole of the year, which you'll probably all know that that does include the drink and drugs campaign that we run every December. I might get time to just mention that at the end of this report. Does anybody want to ask me any questions, Chair, on the Road Safety Partnership before I move on?
Anybody got any questions, Road Safety Partnership? Yes, Councillor Fillmore.
Thank you, Chair. It's principally questions across the piece to do with the overall report. So are you happy for them to be asked now? Certainly. Right. So Jana and Graham, bear with me because I've been busily, frantically trying to type some notes. So what, unless I've missed it in the report, so I think a few bits intrigue me. So safer roads, absolutely. Have we any, if you want to make notes and then just answer them all at the end rather than individually. So have we any sort of feeling or of how much of the improved road safety, as in statistical reduction in injuries, and is down to actually safer vehicles on the road? So if I look at my, we have two Volvos. If I look at the new one compared to the older one, they're vastly different cars and designed to behave in different ways in the event of an accident. I think I'm sure we all recognise that the data for the last couple of years is completely skewed because of COVID, and I'm fairly certain that I've been told in different meetings that what we did experience through certainly the early stages of COVID lockdown were higher impact speeds because there were so few vehicles on the road that people were actually driving faster. And the bit I haven't managed to spot, which is probably relevant and actually may make the statistics look even better, is there appears to be no weighting relative to population growth. Okay, and on these stats, you're going back to what, 2008. Between 2008 and 2022, I wouldn't even like to consider how many what our population growth has been, but it must be quite notable. And then the other bit that jumped out at me, and it's a really interesting question, I think, is the amount of seatbelt or non-wearing of seatbelt offences that have been recorded. Do we need, A, is that a national issue, a national trend? And B, is there therefore a need to go back to some of the basic principles of education? Now, I'm guessing, Graham, both you and I are old enough to remember clunk click every trip. And I just wonder, and it kind of moves into the point that Graham was raising about the communication channels and the way that we communicate with the the new digital generation. So I'm just curious as to, so population growth, weighting, safer cars, and principally education. So I'm just curious, because statistics are whatever they are, and there will be some very significant skewing for the last couple of years. But I'm just curious as to, is there anything in there that is either suggesting or not suggesting that we're doing better than we actually are reporting that we're doing because of population growth? How much is down to safer vehicles, full stop? And is there a need for education again, particularly clunk click every trip? So over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Do you want me to carry on, Jana, or?
Yep, you carry on, Graham, and I'll chip in at the end if they need to, if that's all right with you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for those questions that are very interesting. Yes, you're quite right, and we have looked at the fact that newer vehicles do make a significant impact on road safety, and have done particularly so over the last 15 or 20 years. So you're quite right, that is an important factor. And of course, those vehicles will get even safer in the coming years. And when eventually we'll sit here talking about driverless cars, which hopefully will have a significant impact on road safety. But yes, it's a good point. You're certainly correct that the statistics since 2020 have been skewed since COVID. As Jana pointed out, we're well aware of that. And that's why we're not placing a great importance on the 2020 and the 2021 figures because of lockdown. And we're taking that into consideration. Higher speeds have been a factor, particularly when the traffic levels in the last 2 years were down as much as 65%. So thank you for picking up on that. It's a good point. I'm not an expert on the population growth. I'm not sure how the population has gone up in the last few years. But one factor is that, as I understand it, when I last read it, that the number of the number of youngsters actually applying for a driving license at 17 and 18, funnily enough, has gone down. So whether that will be another factor we've got to look at going forward, I'm not quite sure. And certainly on the seat belts, Chairman, I was going to mention that later on in my report. We are concerned because there is a significant minority of drivers, despite all our clunk click advice, to use the same term, are still driving their vehicles, and some of the passengers are as bad without seat belts. And what is happening is that they are turning minor shunts into serious and sometimes fatal collisions just by not taking a second to put the seatbelt on. So, thank you for those interesting questions. I'll hand to you, Jana, in case you've got anything to add on.
No, I think we share that view. I think the only thing I'd just add on is in Appendix B on page 16 and 17, there is some data around our performance in Leicestershire by population, and also but sort of by per million, and then also compared to other counties, and also our per billion vehicle kilometres. So just to give that, I think you were sort of, the point you're making about putting it in the context of that. What it doesn't probably do is demonstrate any population growth, and I'll have to go away and have a look whether we've got anything specifically on that. But again, I suspect you're right in that we will have seen significant growth over that time as well. So we'll have a look at that. But that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If I could just ask, Graham, how much longer have you got left on your report? Because we have a member who has to leave at 3:30.
Do you want me to whip through quickly, Chairman? But the main headings.
That would be great, please.
Just in case anybody wants to raise a query, I'll cut my response down for the next 10 minutes, and thank you. Yeah, if I can just carry on, Chair and members, I put in a very brief interim casualty report for 2021. I know Jana's covered 2020, And just to put some context on it, I've put the regional fatalities to give everyone an idea of how important this work is. And last year, regionally, over the 5 forces, unfortunately, we had 153 fatalities. So lots of work to do. I've also included the first 9 months of the killed and seriously injured for members to look at on that chart that you can look at your leisure, but they're split across the whole of the force area. I wanted briefly to mention something that's important to you all, which is the Community Speed Watch programme that the police and Leicestershire County Council have run for 10 years very successfully. We are looking to revise the programme this year in the light of the pandemic, and the Leicestershire County Council and ourselves are looking at a revised scheme which we're hoping to get started in the spring. And we know there are literally dozens of parishes out there that are receiving speed complaints and want to do something on their particular sites. I won't go into it any further now, but only to say to you all that you will be hearing shortly what that revised scheme is, what we'll be able to offer. I briefly mentioned brig strikes all over. I know a lot of you suffer from them, particularly the A5 at Hinckley, which is regularly struck, and there are others at Syston which cause a great deal of problems, both on the trains and on the roads, particularly with diversion routes that we have to put into place. We are working very hard on it, and we've put some guidance out to our officers so that they know how to deal with an incident should one occur, including whether or not we need to prosecute the driver of the load. E-scooters, I briefly wanted to mention it because I'm sure you're all receiving complaints about them. We had another serious accident yesterday with an e-scooter. The last time I looked at the stats, we'd had about 18. It's a problem area. We've not resolved it. From a police point of view, we're cautioning people the first time we see them, putting their details on the computer, and then we're taking the scooter off them and destroying it if we get them on the scooter the second time. So that's where we are with these scooters. And again, it's an ongoing issue being looked at by the Road Safety Partnership. The last thing I wanted to mention, I'm not going to wade through the figures of the road safety unit, but I think you can see for yourselves that the road safety unit dealing with the static speed cameras and red light cameras, and also the 7 speed and distance cameras that the Leicestershire County Council put in a couple of years ago, are very, very busy dealing with offenders. So we've just got to keep the attack on speed on, because speed is still our main causation factor for killed and seriously injured, together with distraction, mobile phones. So I've rushed through that, Chairman, to give your colleague an opportunity to ask me any questions before he or she goes.
Thank you, Graham and Jenna. Very comprehensive report, and it's quite sobering to think when you read through it how many people actually get killed and injured in various scenarios through it. It's just, and as Councillor Fillmore said, a clunk click every trip. It should be brought back. It should be a national campaign, but that's just my comment. I'd like to say, obviously, as well, Graham, thank you for the praise for Jenna. That's 2 sets of praise she's had today in one meeting, so she'll be getting a promotion at the end of this meeting, I would imagine. And I would like to say that I have contributed to your road safety campaign through the driver education programme. Okay. I was captured on the A50 with a new fixed speed thing on the A50 when they installed it, because I wasn't paying attention, but it was a good course. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I learnt about gateways and all the rest of it. So well done. I'll hand it over to the floor now if anybody's got any comments. Thank you. Yes, fire away.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, first of all, yes, I've also contributed to the Road Safety Partnership, the A47 coming through Leicester, and yes, the course was very good. Just an observation and kind of a bit of a request moving forward. So the observation is potentially the increase in cycling casualties could potentially be explained by new and, should we say, rusty cyclists taking the opportunity during the pandemic to get on their bikes when maybe that's maybe not as advisable for them as it might be. Would that be possible? And then moving forwards, with the almost exponential increase in electric vehicles, it might be useful if there's a breakdown of pedestrian injuries, etc., specifically with EVs. So I'm sure we've all had the experience where we've not heard it and almost got wiped out by one. So that might be an interesting stat to have a look at in the future. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's a great point, because I nearly got hit in Colville with an electric vehicle 3 days ago. Thank you. Anybody else got any points? Councillor Fillmore will work round.
Yeah, it's just one question. The e-scooter advice, as in first time we're going to tell you, the second time we're going to take it, is that on the highway or on the pavement or footway, or is it both?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. There are several pilots going on across the whole of the country, which the DFT are looking at closely, and they will be reporting at the end of this year. None of the pilot schemes are within our force area, Leicester, Leicestershire or Rutland. So basically anyone riding a e-scooter anywhere, unless it's on private land in this force area, is committing an offence. It's as simple as that, whether it's on a pavement or on the highway. And that's where we are with it. They're all committing an offence because they're classed as a motor vehicle, these things. And of course, as I've already explained, and I'm sure you all realise that they're quite dangerous and quite capable of causing injury. So that's where we are with it. Unfortunately, we are having to take the scooters off people, mainly young people. But we are giving them a chance by offering them the advice, having caught them for the first time.
Councillor Hunt.
Thanks very much, and thanks to Graham for his verbal report. The written report is, as usual, superb. It would be good in the future to focus just on one particular, or two or three particular aspects of change, so that we can look at how to solve some of the problems. But I just want to focus on letter E in the list of headlines on page 127. Which says, when compared killed and seriously injured casualties between 20 and 2019 were significantly increased, and so on, for vulnerable users, which is what Graham has referred to, the vulnerable users being pedal cycles, young casualties, and other people, motorcyclists as well. Apparently they're vulnerable, although they never seem so to me. And the question arises, what are we doing about it? Because I think part of the answer will be, well, in 2020 there were more cycles because of the lockdowns and so on. People took to their bikes, but that caused more killed and seriously injured. And I'm not mentioning the general casualties, because often they are not as consistent and so on to measure. But killed and seriously injured are not only more serious, but the statistics are better. And every year we see these vulnerable users caught up in rising figures. I listened very closely to what Mr. Fillmore said earlier about his Volvos. Volvos are definitely improved, but the human body remains exactly as it was through generations. And cyclists too, whether they're electric cyclists, which electric bikes are also increasing, are also as vulnerable as they ever have been if they're hit by a Volvo, for example. So that's where my focus was after I'd read through the whole report, which, as I say, was excellent. And I wondered what we were doing about it, really. If we're trying to encourage cyclists, we're trying to encourage more casualties, perhaps.
Jana, do you want me to mention our campaign, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I was hoping we could have an answer from Highways because they're responsible.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine, Max.
Okay.
No, you go on, Jana.
Yeah, I was going to say, so in terms of initiatives, they're set out in Appendix, I think, C of the report in terms of the general activity that goes on. And again, Leicestershire does, as Graham probably was going to go on to mention, there's a number of initiatives that we do through the partnership that Leicestershire participates in, particularly around campaigning. Share road space was a real feature for us during the pandemic time, as you pointed out. I think we had a discussion about perhaps whether more people were cycling and expected less conflict, with less people on the road as well during that time. And I think where we are looking at those incidences in particular and looking at whether we could do that, I think in terms of encouraging more cycling generally, there's a whole range of things we're doing around that in terms of when we're looking at new development, stuff in the town centres, things around sharing the road campaigns through the safety work, and also then training and stuff with young people. Somebody mentioned e-bikes as well. We're doing quite a lot around electric bike training and building confidence and things like that, and educating drivers as well at the same time. But I think in terms of, there is that worry about the statistics. I think, it's clearly a concern that anybody loses their life using the road, and particularly, as you say, we consider pedestrians and cyclists to be vulnerable for those reasons. You don't stack up well, do they, the odds when you're faced with a Volvo or any other vehicle. So what we'll do as those instances come in and the detail comes into us is we'll do a report, an instant report on those, look at whether anything in particular needs to be done. And again, I think we have to see what the impact of the changes to the highway code are, and the real hierarchical changes that's made in terms of giving cyclists and pedestrians the right of way. And see how that's implemented and rolled out as well. So I think probably it's not giving you enough about the detail of exactly what we're doing. We're also implementing the walking and cycling strategy, as you'll be aware. I think perhaps the sort of building on the feedback is something that you would like a little bit more detail on and discussion about next time, additional to the information that's in the appendices and other work we're doing. Is that probably fair, Chair?
I'd agree with what Councillor Hunt says, because it's hard to pull out the report all of the good work you're doing, and it sounds like both yourself and Graham and the police are doing great work. So if we've got statistics telling us where all our casualties and injuries are, and you've got stuff to address it, then I really think you should be sharing that with the committee without making it another monster report. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we're just learning on, Chair, because I think we've pulled out quite a lot of the initiatives because they were in the report making it monster. I think this is an iteration, I think, to get it to that balance that you and Councillor Hunt are looking for, and that's no problem. We can take that feedback away and have a look at how we do that without expanding the report out too far.
Thank you, Councillor. And Graham, did you have something to say to this?
I think Jana's covered it, Chair, very, very well. I mean, our Share the Road campaign, which is aimed at our vulnerable road users, we launched it 2 years ago. We've had many events and initiatives, and that is carrying on this year, and it's specifically aimed at our pedal cyclists and our pedestrians and also horse riders. And we are at this moment in time, apart from everything else, we are putting signs up throughout the whole of the Force area at vulnerable, what we consider vulnerable sites, particularly for our pedal cyclists. And of course, we are engaging with as many pedal cyclist groups as we possibly can. And as Jana has just said, the changes in the highway code hopefully will impact on our vulnerable groups. So thank you, Chair.
And hopefully that impact is in the right direction. Because
yes,
it's big change out there, and people are already telling me, and I was going to raise it with item 30, paragraph 34D. It'd be interesting to see in 2 years' time where the statistics are with injuries to cyclists following the changes to the highway code. That would be interesting to see them stats. Thank you. Any other points on this, Councillor Fillmore?
Yeah, can I just ask, and just for clarity, my wife and I may drive Volvos. Other vehicle marks do exist. It's a personal choice. The latter point you just mentioned, Graham, about engaging with as many cycle clubs as you possibly can. Just a very sort of random question, but I'm very conscious that there's a very established bicycle hire company very close to St John's headquarters, and I'm just curious, are we at that level as well, where we're actually going to kind of cycle hire centres?
Thank you. No, it's a very interesting point, and our main event in 2021, despite the pandemic, was held at the Rutland Cycle Centre. So thank you for that, where the cycle clubs all attended, and we did a couple of rides into the county. There was dozens and dozens of cyclists turned up. When we launched again the campaign, and our new kit that we've provided for them, which is basically aimed at drivers with the Safe Pass. I hope everybody's heard of the Safe Pass, where we're trying to get drivers to pass cyclist safety at least 1.5 metres away from them. So the Rutland cycles are excellent, and it's just one venue that we are using going forward. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. If no further items, I'll move on. Thank you. So item 12, Highways and Transport Performance Report to December 21. Over to Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief, given that we've had quite a long agenda as it is. This report looks to quarter 3 of last financial year, so that's to December 2021. There are 22 indicators, 15 of them have been updated, and I will focus on those and the main changes there, because the committee is familiar with this quarterly performance report. Just to help with that, I would refer members to the dashboard at Appendix B. It is worth noting that we have had 10 indicators that have declined this quarter. Despite that fact, 13 of the indicators out of that set of 22 are in the top quartile for that indicator. So against our comparator authorities, we're coming out in that top quartile. So it does show, you know, across a number of those indicators, we are doing really quite well. If I start with a strong economy strategic outcome, we have a number of indicators that have been updated this time round, and that's because we've had the results of the NHT, the National Highways and Transportation Survey for last year, that they're now available, so we've updated those indicators. We have seen a decline in satisfaction in a number of areas under that, coming out of that survey. However, the overall satisfaction with condition of the highways has declined by 5%, and this is the first decline that we've seen since 2017. Similarly, satisfaction with the rights of way network, with the condition of pavements and footways, with traffic levels and congestion also relatively small, however, but still was a decline. Again, though, as I'd say, our performance is above average because we are in the top quartile for all of those. The indicator for private and government funding secured towards delivering infrastructure, we do see a significant increase there, 115% in 2021. That's for the year. I would caveat that, however, it does very much depend on when development comes forward, and therefore when Section 106 developer contributions actually come in. So there's a timing issue. And also, you know, if it's for highway infrastructure and it's a bidding round to government, when that funding stream comes along, because they are ad hoc funding streams, etc. I would also just point out that 2/3 of that amount for that financial year was secured towards education infrastructure. So it is infrastructure for the authority as a whole and not just the highways and transport world. Satisfaction with local bus services fell by 3%, and that continues the trend that we've seen since 2016. However, again, still in top quartile when compared to other comparator authorities. Bus passenger journeys declined by 8%. Relating to the impact of the Omicron variant, you know, we had begun to see, you know, bus passenger journeys climbing again after the first kind of wave of the pandemic, but that variant, you know, took that back down again. I would note, however, those figures are significantly down on the pre-COVID figures. You know, that while we're, you know, monitoring the ups and downs at the moment, they're still way below what would have been classed as kind of normal patronage figures. While Park and Ride Journey saw a 341% increase, which was, you know, it looks like it's a massive increase on its own. Again, these numbers are significantly below, you know, what would be normal patronage figures on our Park and Ride services in the pre-pandemic period. Last in this section, and on a positive note, satisfaction with cycle routes and facilities improved by 4%. And again, that one's in the top quarter for that data set. Under the road safety section, page 194, as you've heard in the previous, with the previous report on the agenda, we are a high performing authority and all the indicators under that category are in the top quartile again. The only KPI I would pick out is the number killed in series injured under walking, cycling and motorcyclists, which declined by 8%, seeing the highest rate since 2018. Again, and you have had a fair discussion about this in the earlier item, but you know, might be partly linked to the pandemic, given that more people were cycling and walking during the pandemic. However, you know, as you know, things started opening up again, we saw more vehicles out in the road as well during this period. You know, and as you're aware, I think the only other thing I would say with casualty figures, we really do need to look at the longer term trends in that. They were the key points I wanted to pick out from this report, Chair, but happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you. Anne, any points from the floor?
Thank you. I'll tell you what I find really interesting, Anne, is the overall satisfaction score. With a different hat that I wear in a different place, I am incredibly conscious that what happened through COVID, because people were out more and going for their 1 hour daily walk and all the rest of that, and were working from home, there's definitely been a big skew on people seeing more. Even though it's been there for the last 5 years, they're actually seeing more. And I would suspect that's part of that change of satisfaction scoring, just because I just see it myself, you know, face on in the inbox. Yeah, it was like that 4 years ago, you know. So people are definitely seeing more and probably looking harder, and therefore I think that will probably be an influence on that scoring this time round. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other points from the floor? Thank you, Anne, for that report. Item 13, date of the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled to take place on Thursday, the 9th of June, 2022 at 1400 hours. And I take it it'll be in this room. Thank you. Item 14, any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent? We have no urgent items, so I would like to thank everybody and I will draw this meeting to a close. Thank you.